Hello everyone, so this time I would like to present about review approaches in curriculum or syllabus design. So this material was taken from Nation and McAllister 2010 in chapter 5, which is about goals, content, and sequencing. So content and sequencing must consider the environment in which the course will be used, the needs of the learners, and also the principles of teaching and learning. And then here is the table 5.1 about the list some of the factors to consider. First is the environment, including learners, teachers, and situation. And for the second factor is the needs, including likes, wants, and necessities. And the last factor is principles that we can read in the previous chapter for the relevant principle. Okay, and the next slide is about the goals and the content. So the goals of a language lesson can focus on one or more of the following language, ideas, skills, or texts. So it means that by looking at each of those four categories or areas, it can help you to plan or assess the course content. So in each of these four areas, decisions about the units for planning and evaluating courses must be made. For example, in the area of language, the units may be based on vocabulary, verb forms and verb patterns, sentence patterns, or language function. Therefore, making sensible, well-justified decisions about content is one of the most important parts of the curriculum design. And the next one is about the units of progression in the course. So the units progression in a course are the items that are used to grade the progress of the course. For example, if the starting point of a course is language items and vocabulary, and then the units progressions will be the words or word frequency. While if the starting points of a course is topic, then the unit's progression will also be a topic with progress through the course being marked by increasing number of topics that are covered. And the units of progressions can be classified into two types: those that progress in a definite series such as vocabulary levels, and those that represent a field of knowledge that could be covered in any order such as topic. And then here is table 5.2 shows the units of progression for a range of starting points. So here the starting point vocabulary, grammar, and component skills belong to the progress in a definite series, while the others belong to represent a field of knowledge. And then what will the progression be used for? So units of progression can be used for a variety of purposes. First, units of progression can be used to set targets and paths to those targets. And second one, units of progression can be used to check the adequacy of selection and ordering in a course. And the last one, units of progression can be used to monitor and report on learners' progress and achievement in the course. So let's now look briefly at the units of progression to see what information is available to guide in the choice and sequencing of the items. Okay, the first is vocabulary. So there is a lot of frequency-based research out there that shows what vocabulary learners would benefit the most from knowing. And this study emphasized the importance of ensuring that learners have a clear understanding of language's high-frequency vocabulary. The first 1,000 words account for 75% of the successive words in a text, and the second 1,000 words account for 5% of the successive words in a text, and the last one, 570 academic words account for 10% of the successive words in an academic text. And then the grammar. So there are several frequency counts of verb form usage in English which can act as the basis for the selection and sequencing of items in a course. So George 1963 suggests that a reasonable basis for stage 1 of a course would consist of the following verbs such as imperative, don't plus stem, or imperative, simple present, verb plus to plus stem, simple past, and past participle. So this group of items accounts for 575 of every 1000 successive verb forms in written English. And the stage 2 of a course could add the following items: simple past, past perfect, stem plus ing equals noun, can, may, will, must plus stem, and etc. So stage 1 and 2 items together account for 756 of every 1000 successive verb forms. And items for stage 3 of a course do not occur frequently, and their frequency depends on the type of material that the learner is going to read. So items like verb plus to plus stem occur early in the sequence because they allow learners to fulfill the language needs. For example, I like to sing or I want to go. And then the functions. So there is no standard list of language functions with frequency information. Van Eck and Alexander 1980 provide the most widely published list of functions, which is divided into 6 categories. The first one, imparting and seeking factual information, and then expressing and finding out intellectual attitudes, expressing and finding out emotional attitudes, expressing and finding out moral attitudes, and then getting things done or suasion, and the last one is socializing. And the Council of Europe 2001 builds on the earliest list, adding new emphasis. First, imparting and seeking factual information, expressing and finding out attitudes, suasion, socializing, structuring discourse, and communicative repair. So the risk with functionally based course is that the curriculum designers may feel obligated to present multiple ways of expressing the same function. For example, like multiple ways of reviewing something. And then the discourse. So discourse as the basis for units of progression to be used in pre-university courses when learners systematically cover a range of relevant genres such as recounts, information reports, and arguments. So table 5.3 contains Bieber's text types, and this may serve as a simple checklist for a course. And Bieber 1990 also describes the grammatical features that cluster in these various groups. And then skills, sub-skills, and strategies. So some courses use skills and sub-skills as their units of progression. Reading courses, for example, may focus on skills such as finding the main idea, reading for detail, note-taking, skimming, reading faster, and reading for inferences. And there are 3 major ways of defining sub-skills. One is to look at the range of activities covered by a skill such as speaking, and to use this as a starting point for defining sub-skills. And another way is to look at the skill as a process and to divide it into the parts of the process. So this is a typical way of approaching writing by dividing the writing process into parts. And the third way of dividing up a skill is to use levels of cognitive activity. So the most well-known approach of this kind be found in what is popularly known as Bloom's taxonomy. And then it is about the ideas. So a successful language training not only improves the learner's command of the language but also introduces them to concepts that assist language learning and are helpful to them. So the ideas content of a course can take many forms. So here is the following list that is adapted from Cook 1983. So the ideas content of a course can be about imaginary happening. So the course could follow the typical activities or adventures of a group of learners or native speakers. And the second one is an academic subject. For example, it would be linguistics or the special purpose of the learners, such as agriculture, tourism, commerce, or computing. And the third one is learner survival needs. So they may include topics like shopping, going to the doctor, getting a driver license, and making friends. And the fourth one is the interesting facts. This might include topics like the discovery of penicillin, whales, and solar power. And the last one is the culture. And then the following list of criteria can be used to guide and evaluate the choice of ideas in a language course. And the criteria are into groups: those that help the learning within the classroom and those that make the language course acceptable and useful outside the classroom. First, the idea content of the course helps learning in the classroom because it makes the learners interested and motivated in their study of the language, and then encourages normal language use, and it makes learning easier. And the last one allows the teacher to work from a position of strength. And the second one is the ideas content of the course increases the acceptability and usefulness of the course outside the classroom because it helps the learner's job, study, or living, and then develops awareness of another culture or cultures, and then it maintains and supports the learner's own culture, and it helps learners develop intellectually by making them aware of important and challenging ideas. And then it helps learners develop emotionally and socially. And the last one, it meets the expectation of the learners and their parents. So the justification listed above can be reclassified according to the part of the curriculum design model. For example, the final justification listed above regarding student and teacher expectations relates to the constraints, and the second to last justification for emotional and social development relates to the needs. Therefore, the choice of content ideas from a course will have a major influence on the marketability and acceptability of the course, and it requires careful consideration and application of the findings of the needs analysis and environmental analysis. Okay, so the next slide is about task-based syllabuses. So, with the shift to communicative language teaching in 1970s, there was a greater emphasis on using English to convey a message, and as a result, the use of tasks in the classroom received more attention. So the observation that many so-called communicative language courses still relied heavily on a series of language forms increased interest in task-based rather than task-supported syllabuses. One of the questions that arises is, what is a task? So many different definitions have been proposed, and then Alice 2003 provide 9 different definitions, one of which is especially useful for teachers. So a task is an activity which requires learners to use language, which emphasizes on meaning to attain an objective. So here is a sample task from Prabhu 1987, which demonstrates how the learner needs to focus on and understand the meaning of the language in order to complete the task successfully. And then Willis and Willis 2007 have provided 6 questions that can help the teacher and the curriculum designer determine the extent to which an activity is task-like. So here, the first one is, does the activity engage learners' interest? Is there a primary focus on meaning? Is there an outcome? is success judged in terms of outcome? Is completion of priority? And the last one, does the activity relate to real-world activities? So these all questions could be used in both task-based and task-supported syllabuses. And then sequencing the content in a course. So there are two major divisions. Whether the material in one lesson depends on the learning that has occurred in previous lessons, it's called a linear development, or whether each lesson is separate from the others so that the lessons can be done in any order and need not all be done. So it's called a modular arrangement. And there are variations of linear progressions which try to take account of the need for repetition. These include a spiral curriculum, matrix models, revisions units, and field approaches to sequencing. The first one is developing a spiral curriculum involves deciding on the major items to cover, and then covering them several times over a period of time at increasing levels of detail. In the following diagram, the spiral line represents the progressions of the curriculum, and the radial blocks represent the material to be learned, with the starting point at the center of the spiral, as you can see in figure 5.1. And then a metric models in the table 5.4 is somewhat similar to a spiral curriculum. So in the metric models, one unit of progression is systematically varied against another, so that the same item meets different contexts. For example, the same grammatical item is focused on different topics. And then the revision unit, as in table 5.5, are simply an addition to a linear model. At certain points in the linear progression, time is spent revising previously met material. So the relative amount of time allotted for revision should increase as the course progresses. This is because there will be more and more material being revised, and the material needs to be revised several times, not just once. Ideally, the revision activity should do more than just repeat previously items, but should enrich them in some way. And the last one, in field approach, the items to be covered are decided upon, and the learners can start anywhere with the material and end anywhere as long as it is all covered. So if this approach is taken for vocabulary in speaking course, then a large number of activities will be designed that they use the wanted vocabulary as part of the written input for the activity. So a rough check can be made to see, for example, that each wanted vocabulary item occurs in the written input for at least 5 activities. The second major type of approach is the modular approach. This approach breaks down the courses into the independent non-linear units. So these units can be part of lesson, or group of lessons. Each unit or module is self-contained and does not normally assume prior module knowledge. And in language courses, the language could be divided into modules in several ways, and the modules could be skill-based with different modules for listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and sub-skills of these larger skills. And the modules could be based on language functions, or more broadly situations dealing with the language needed for shopping, emergency services, travel, the post office, and the bank. Okay, that's all from my presentation. So before I close this presentation, I'd like to give a brief summary. So because this meeting discusses about review approaches in curriculum or syllabus design, there are two major divisions of sequencing the content in a course. The two major divisions are whether the material in one lesson depends on the learning that has occurred in previous lessons, or whether each lesson is separate from the others so that the lessons can be done in any order and need not all be done. So these two major divisions are called a linear approach and a modular approach. So that's all from my presentation. Thank you so much.